So shall we start?
Yeah, I think we're ready to go. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny. I'm the TA for the Climate Action course. I'm here with Frank Wang. He is an executive director at GEIDCO. Frank, thank you for joining us. Can you talk a little bit about your background and how you got to working on state grids? Hi. Yes, we have some. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So can you describe a bit your background and your role at GEIDCO?
Yeah. So I just said I owned a bachelor degree in German literature and a master degree in educational science. Although I didn't have any engineering background in education, but I worked in energy sector for over 10 years. From 2008 to 2015, I worked for State Grid Corporation of China. And since 2016, when GEIDCO was established, I have been working for GEIDCO. And in March 2018, last year, I was appointed as executive director of GEIDCO North American office. And the mission of GEIDCO North American office includes with local energy, promoting cooperation between GEIDCO and local institutions. So my office is located in West 46th Street. So you just, if you are in New York, just come by. And also my office is one of the 7 regional offices across the world of GEIDCO. Yeah, that's a little about my background and my office. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Can you describe what it is exactly that GEIDCO does? What does GEIDCO want to achieve?
Yes, GEIDCO is an abbreviation for Global Energy Interconnection, Development and Cooperation Organization. It's a long name, so we have an abbreviation as GEIDCO. GEIDCO is an international organization registered in Beijing, China. It's an organization committed to promoting clean energy development and power grid interconnection, and effectively to major world is facing, such as energy shortage, environmental pollution, and climate change. So our objective is to promote the global to meet the global power demand with clean and green alternatives. And by the end of 2018, GEIDCO has a global membership of over 600 entities covering 80 regions. Our membership made up of enterprises, universities, research organizations from various sectors such as energy, electric power, information, environmental protection, scientific research, and consulting and finance. Yeah.
Great. So can you describe what are the pros and cons of having a decentralized versus centralized power system when it comes to renewable energy? Because a lot of people, when they think about renewable energy, they think of something small scale, and yet the small scale of that, critics might say that it's not powerful enough to power like an entire city, let alone an entire country. So can you talk a little bit about those pros and cons?
Yes, I think you raised a very interesting and hot topic, especially in recent days. I think that's a question. Actually, that's a question of how we can develop renewable energies, or the pattern of development of renewable energies. I think that largely depends on the characteristics of renewable energy resources. We know that in some zones there are high quality wind and solar. For example, in Midwest and in Southwest United States, there are a lot of wind and solar, and with high quality, high density of energy. But in load centers, such as in big cities, there's less windy and there's less solar irradiation, and so there's a difference of the quality of renewable resources. I can give you some numbers to elaborate more about it. For example, in Midwest of United States, the wind generation the full load hours of wind generation can be as much as many as 3,000 hours. But in New York, maybe that number would be less than 2,000. And also for solar energy, we know that there's a lot of sunshine in sub-Sahara in Africa. The PV generation, the full load hours of PV generation can reach as high as 2,000 hours. But in large cities such as New York, it would be less than 1,000. So from the technical perspective, both centralized and distributed generation are technically feasible. But from the economic perspective, centralized power generation may be more competitive. I'll give you an example. Because of high rate of utilization, the cost of generation from centralized wind in Midwest US is as low as 2 cents per kilowatt hour. PPA tariff plus transmission cost is still much lower than local decentralized PV generation. So the transmission cost can be largely offset by the difference of the cost between high quality zones and low quality zones. So that's with that we explain the desirability of long distance transmission. So that's why we need a long distance transmission to enable power transmission from centralized generation in remote areas to where energy is needed and consumed.
Right. That's a really good explanation of this, because it seems like having a lot of people who are against renewable energies, they say that it's too high cost and that it's unrealistic. It seems like you've left the group chat. So it looks like we're having some technical difficulties here, but I guess I'll just summarize what we've been talking about. A lot of detractors of renewable energy talk about how it's going to be too high cost and it's not feasible until it's competitive with fossil fuels. And in many places that might be true, but if there is a large enough grid to make it so that you could purchase power from somewhere that is the lowest cost, making renewables more competitive because you're able to purchase or have access to renewable energy from anywhere, then the question of the feasibility and the cost of renewables versus other sources of energy, it becomes a non-issue. If anything, it becomes almost not cost effective, definitely not cost effective if this kind of grid is made. It's not cost effective to rely on unclean sources of energy like fossil fuels. So when Frank is able to get back online, we'll be discussing more about having a centralized power grid and how that will help achieve ambitious goals such as reaching net zero emissions by 2050, which is the goal that we have been talking about in this course and that I have discussed with Professor Masson Delmont of the IPCC last week. Having this goal is super ambitious, but having different strategies of achieving this makes it a lot easier. And if the world is able to achieve a globally interconnected energy grid, then that would be a really good way to achieve this goal because about 72% of the global emissions come from energy. So if we're able to get that down to as close to zero as possible, then the rest is a lot easier. After that, we will be discussing the role of how transmission, how that happens, because there is a science to it, but if you're able to make it so that the costs of getting renewables are low, then the cost of transmission will basically pay for itself. And there are, of course, security concerns when it comes to cross-border grid interconnections. Hacking is a major concern, but if the world's leaders are able to agree on having a global grid, then that will be a hugely symbolic and also economic form of unity. And you know, if everyone is connected to the grid, no one will want anything bad to happen to it, basically. And when it comes to the energy transition that's happening in China right now, no country in the world is producing more renewable energy than China because it's a country where they're able to produce things at mass scale. Hi, Frank, are you back online? Hello.
Hello.
Hi, is everything okay?
Yeah.
Great. So I was just talking to students about the stuff that we were going to discuss. Just getting back into the questions. Can you discuss how having a centralized power grid will help achieving ambitious goals such as reaching net zero emissions by 2050?
Yes. Yeah, I got. Hello, Jenny, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay? Hi. It looks like,
Oh.
Can you hear me? Yeah, are we okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Can you discuss how having a centralized power grid helps
Okay.
with achieving ambitious goals?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I think that's what the world is pursuing, a net zero emission by 2050. That's an essential part of the Paris Agreement. I think that's the aim of the whole world. So how to achieve this target? I think we can translate the expression into decarbonized energy system. And the essential part of decarbonizing energy system is to make best use of renewable energy. But how renewable energy can be utilized effectively? And renewable energy is can only be used and transformed into electricity on-site and delivered to load centers. So for the renewable energy is by nature intermittent, both intermittent and unevenly distributed. So that's basic energy. So to overcome intermittency of renewable energy, such as wind and solar, we must have a strong electricity system. And evidence is that the larger the grid is, the better renewable energy can be smoothed out and balanced.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. So major renewable energy bases are usually thousands of miles away from load centers, or so there are mega grid connecting both are necessary to serve this end. So we think that our interconnected and robust electricity system is vital to achieve net zero emission future by 2050. Yeah.
All right. So in your professional opinion, is this possible? Is decarbonizing the energy system possible through electricity?
Yes, I think it's possible because we have technology improvement, a huge improvement in the last decades. For example, in China, we have major breakthroughs in transmission technology. We have innovated transmission technology, which is ultra high voltage technology, which with this technology, we can transmit power over 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers. And it's capable of transmitting 10 gigawatts or even larger than 10 gigawatts power with one single line. And that's also implemented in China and also in Brazil.
Can you explain what the scale of 10 gigawatts is? Because I'm sure a lot of people don't know. Like, can you compare that to like a factory or something that people can like understand?
Yeah. Okay. I think most of the students are in New York. I come from New York. I think so. New York is a large city with a lot of energy consumption, and as far as I know, the peak demand of New York City is around 30 gigawatt. 30 gigawatt. So with a single UHV line, it can 1/3 of the electricity demand of the New York City can be met with this technology, with a single line of this technology.
Wow, so it's probably enough to power like all of Brooklyn and maybe Queens. That's really impressive.
Many about Shanghai region. Yeah, and Shanghai now Shanghai is the power consumption in Shanghai is almost the same as New York, and now over 70% of the electricity consumption in Shanghai was served by distance transmission.
Wow!
From Western Sichuan province. Distance between Southwest Sichuan and Shanghai.
That's really cool. So it's totally possible to power entire cities through a few transmission lines. So speaking of transmission, can you discuss if or will the role of transmission be eroded in a high distributed energy resource future? So if in the future people are consuming more energy, will the role of transmission be eroded?
Okay, that's also a very interesting question, and a lot of people debate on this topic. Yes, actually, with the technology improvement, distributed energy is developing very fast, especially distributed PV system, and also distributed wind, solar near bigger cities. Yes, I think distributed energy is very useful to meet local demand. But from the general perspective, I think distributed energy with a high penetration of distributed energy, transmission is still needed, and even in this case, transmission will even play a bigger role. I can give you an example. We know that in Germany, there are a lot of rooftop PV systems in Germany, and in some local distribution area, the penetration of PV is as high as 80% or even more, and even in some cases, PV generation is much higher than local demand. So in this case, more excess power must flow from lower level of the grid to the upper level of the grid, to the transmission level, and then transmission solar PV power can be transmitted and balanced in cooperation with neighboring countries. That's what is happening in Germany.
Wow, that's really impressive, because most of the sunlight that's produced during the day, it's produced when people aren't home. So it makes a lot of sense to connect a home to a grid so that it can be sold, and a homeowner can make money as an energy provider, basically. And when they sell it back, and then when they're home, when they come home from work, they'll still have be able to afford power because there's this grid interconnection, and that's something that can't be achieved if you're just living off the grid with like a solar panel on top of your house. It's doable, but having the grid as a backup makes it so that your energy costs are much lower.
Yes. On one hand, you can generate more power and sell it to make profit. And when there's no sunshine during the night, you can draw power from the public grid to. That's how it works in the future, and the residents in the future.
That's really impressive, and that definitely, there are people who kind of think that when you change the grid, it will make your life a lot more difficult, but in some ways this makes it even easier. But there are some concerns, I guess. So if you could address the security concerns and how to make it so that it's not so much of a concern anymore, that would be great.
Yes. Just as I introduced, GEIDCO is promoting a cross-border and even in grid interconnection. And when we talk about this topic, security is a major issue people may raise when we discuss cross-border grid interconnection. Then my first answer is that yes, I think that's justified because every country, every region would like to have its own generation and would like to have full control of its own energy issue. But I think in a world but in today's world, peace and cooperation is still the prevail. Peace and cooperation prevail in modern world. So grid interconnection will cause loss to both generation country and consumption country. So nobody would do something which not benefit itself, also not benefit the other people. If we have interconnections with each other, we can, both consumption country and generation country can and also I think we can do something to make interconnection secure. For example, as I say it, interconnection should not be a single one. Should be a multi-corridor interconnection. Neighboring, because we have multiple interconnections with neighboring countries. If one country disconnects with me, I can still have power supply from other neighboring countries. That's what we think. And also, we can think of some international grid mechanism to avoid such bad cases. International treaty to make grid operational even when there is a war between countries. Yeah, that's something that we can imagine and something we can do in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation of this, because if everyone works together, no one would want their grid to fail. If they're just acting in their own self-interest.
Yeah, I can add a few words. I'm not sure, but I have heard that even when West Germany and East Germany were separated after the Second World War, the two countries still had great interconnection, even though they were separated with different social system.
Right. It just doesn't make sense to build a separate grid. It's just so much cost, and people aren't going to be able to use their phones.
We can make a comparison. We can make a comparison. You know that the internet is internationally interconnected.
Right.
And nobody will cut or will disconnect from. We have differences in some issues, political disputes and others. So I think we can overcome these differences and to ensure a great interconnected system work for all.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So my last question for you is, can you discuss a bit the factors that are driving the pretty remarkable energy transition that's happening in China right now?
Yes, I know that China. I think most of the people know that China is a very large country and it's a coal-based country. To be specifically, in China, coal makes up almost 70% of the energy consumption. but China has an ambitious target to combat climate change and to develop renewable energies. And several years ago, Chinese government had rolled out a national plan, which is to pursue 15% of energy consumption from renewable energies by 2020 and 20% renewable energies by 2030. I think that's a very ambitious plan for a country, for such a coal-based country. And how to make that happen? And I can proudly tell you that China has made a big step forward in this regard. China is now the #1 country in terms of wind generation, solar generation, and hydro generation. Yeah, because next year we will surely meet the target of 15% renewable energies from in the energy mix. And in this process, great development has played a major role. Resources are distributed unevenly. Most of the hydropower are concentrated in southwest China, just as I introduced, in Sichuan province. And most of the wind are in northwest and north China. And most of the solar power are in the northwest China. And all the renewable energy bases are 1,000 to 3,000 kilometers away from coastal areas where Chinese industrial bases are located. So in this case, we must think out ways to deliver power from renewable energy bases to load centers. And the state grid has done a lot of work in this regard. Ever since 2004, state grid has been developing UHV technology or ultra high voltage technologies, both DC and AC. And in the past more than 10 years, the technology has been mature, and up to now there are almost or over 20 UHV AC lines are in place in China, connecting renewable energy bases and in the west and consumption center, big cities in the east. And in this way, a lot of renewable energies are delivered and consumed, not only in West China where renewable energy is produced, and also in industrial bases in the coastal areas. So in this way, China is able to develop large-scale renewable energies. I think China is still on the way to achieve more or scaling up their renewable energies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. That was a really good, it's true that there are so many steps that have been taken by China to achieve more renewable energy interconnection. And it's very interesting that in a country like China, they strategically put their resources where it would generate the most power. And that could be a model for in the US, for example, where there's more sunlight in like Arizona than there is in Maine. It wouldn't make that much sense to just for every state to build their own like hydro, wind, and solar factories, I guess, in every state when it could just be a regional cooperation system.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining us. This was a really interesting discussion. Do you have any last comments to make before we conclude?
Yes, thank you very much. And I think we have talked a lot in this session, and I'm very. It was a great pleasure for me to be part of this conversation. And the last message I want to deliver is that GEIDCO, as an international organization, it recruits staff, international staff every year. So if you are interested, and if you are students who are interested in it, you can just yeah, log on to go to our website and to learn more about GEIDCO, and maybe we have opportunities to work together. Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. Yeah, so to anyone who's watching this, if you're interested in building or being part of the building of the infrastructure that is necessary to transition to renewable energy and totally decarbonize the energy sector, it sounds like it's going to take a lot of work, but it's not impossible. And doing so will definitely create a better world, because it means that in order to get there, people will have to change the way they think about each other and how they cooperate. So thank you so much for joining us.
One last point, sorry. Yeah. The last point is that we have, GEIDCO has an academic journal, which is titled Global Energy Interconnection. It publishes every 2 months, and it's academically oriented. So students who and teachers, if you have some research findings, you are welcome to submit your research findings papers, and GEIDCO would like to publish your research findings with our journal. Yeah, I will share you some more detailed information about our journal later. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so if anyone who's watching is doing research on renewable energy, global interconnection, or grids, any of the above, anything that has to do with renewables, please contact either me or Frank. I'm sure GEIDCO would be happy to discuss your research. So thank you so much for joining us, Frank. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.